All right, everybody, welcome back to Ask a Dev. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We are going to be taking a step back and giving you all a broad picture look at how a game gets made, what the pipeline looks like, what it even is, to give you just an overarching understanding of where all the pieces come together and why we're doing what we're doing when we're in Unreal Engine and we're working with blueprints, and also where does all this stuff come from? So by community request, today we're going to be focusing on one aspect of game development, production, whatever you're working on, and that is going to be the character art pipeline. So with that, let's hop in and get started. Generally speaking, the way this goes is somebody has an idea. Could be a film, could be a game, could be a virtual experience, all kinds of stuff. But we need, or generally want, an idea to work from. Once you have the idea, hopefully you have characters in your idea, or if you happen to have characters in your idea, we need to be able to create and build those characters. Generally that starts off with, after all the story is done and everything like that, generally what it starts off with is it starts off with a concept artist. Concept artists will often sit down with the art director, or sometimes the art director is a concept artist, and they start coming up with what do the characters look like for this game, production, experience, whatever it is you're working on. And what do those look like? What does the concept look like? Well, it takes all kinds of different shapes. I went back through and I grabbed a whole bunch of different pieces of art from some previous projects that I used to work on. And you can see here, these are all different styles. They're created by different artists, and they were all meant to be used for different games or big stories or films or productions. So I'm just going to go through a couple of these for you to check out. So you can start to see some of the diversity. Sometimes they're 2D, sometimes they're more photoreal, sometimes they're more stylized than others. And a lot of times the concepts, they're just all the really cool drawings that a lot of us just really truly appreciate looking at. And sometimes it's a single character, sometimes it'll be a lineup of characters. A lot of times it might be, if you're talking about environment, etc., it might be a whole environment, but in this case we're talking about characters. So we're actually going to be working in the context of a couple of these characters to help you understand where this all comes together. So now we have our concepts. Here's a couple more, some dragons, etc. And a lot of times they'll include information. So you can see here on the right, not only do we have the original concept, which is the 2D drawing, but we also have all of the color swatches that go with it. And these are used by reference for all the artists throughout the process to make sure everybody is staying on, it's called staying on character on model, but the whole idea is that we're all working towards a singular vision of what these characters in this experience should look like. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at this in the context of a specific character, and in this case, that's going to be Tanner. Tanner is over here on the left. We have a concept for Tanner. So now that we have a concept, what do we do with that? What happens next? Well, because we're working in 3D, we need to take this 2D idea and convert it into a 3D model. What is a 3D model? A 3D model, you can think of it as just like a traditional sculptor when they sculpted things out of stone and statues and so on, except we're doing it inside the computer. So your character artist now picks up from where the concept artist what the concept artist delivered. A character artist, they're sometimes called character artists, character modelers, or just sculptors. They basically use potentially a bunch of different tools. You'll hear words like ZBrush, Maya, those are some of the big ones, but 3D Studio Max, there's all kinds of tools that they use to literally sculpt these characters in a digital representation. What does that look like? So we're going to take this model, or this concept, and I'm going to show you what this model looks like. So the character artist will sit down and they will start stitching together triangles, or it'll oftentimes, like if they're using ZBrush, it looks like a ball of clay, and they're kind of sculpting this ball of clay to come together to eventually turn into a 3D representation of the original concept art. So you can see here we have a 3D representation of the concept art. And in this particular case, this is like the character's jacket, their face, their head, their body, the shoes. And this is the model, the 3D model that was created as a realization of the concept art. Now, this is not done in one pass. This is the entire process is generally an iterative process. So let's take a look at what that looks like. What happens is the model gets created, the character artist finishes a version of the model, and they'll send it back. They'll send it back to the art director or the original concept artist, and the original concept artist will go through and they'll do drawovers, and you can see some of those here. Where are the important bits to make sure that we are realizing the spirit of the original vision of this character? Then the character modeler will take these notes, go back to 3D, and make those adjustments and changes. Now, when you're done, what you're left with is you're left with a 3D model. What the heck is a 3D model? Well, it's basically a series of triangles that go together to create the skin of the character. So what does that look like? If I show you, what I can do is I can show you, I basically cut this character in half so you can see it, and you can actually look inside. This character is hollow inside. Generally speaking, all of the characters are hollow inside. They're kind of like those chocolate bunny rabbits you used to get as a kid, where you break them open and they're hollow inside. So all of this, if I click on one of it, you can see all of the pieces that are stitched together to make this look solid. So in this particular case, if I pick the jacket, you can see a series of, they're called faces. And generally speaking, you'll hear people talking about triangles and quadrilaterals, because these faces, the square that defines the surface of this jacket, is made up of a whole bunch of triangles that make it look smooth in this case. This is an oversimplified version of it, but hopefully it'll help understand. Now, at this point, we have created our character model. It has been approved by the art director or the original concept artist, whatever it is. What happens next on our journey to getting this into our game or experience? Well, we have the skin. We need a way to move the character. So just like a person, usually we use joints to do this. So just like a person has bones inside them, we can put bones inside of our 3D character. So if we take a look at what that might look like, what I can do is I can show you these bones are all representative of what the joints might be inside your character. So what happens is we take all of these bones, and a new artist comes along, and this artist is usually called a character setup artist. Sometimes they're called a technical artist or a rigger, because what you're doing is you are rigging the skin sort of to the skeleton. So basically this is the skeleton. It is made up of a bunch of joints, and what happens is, just like a person, well, almost just like a person, when you have the joints, you need to attach the skin. Now, we have muscles, we have tendons, we have all kinds of stuff that goes into it, and there's a lot of tips, or not tips, there's lots of techniques that are used in order to attach the skin to this digital skeleton that we've created. And once you've done that, if you were to pick one of these joints and you were to move it, generally speaking, your skin will go along with it. If I bring this back, you can see now my skin travels with however or wherever I move this joint to. So now I can raise the character's arms, I can do all kinds of stuff and make this character move, which is great. So we have a concept artist, then we have our character artist, then we have a technical artist or a character setup or rigging artist. They come through, they attach everything, but they're not quite done because there's another step. Now that we have our character and they're able to move, who does the movement? This is where our character animation team comes in. So our character animation team hops in and they want to animate on this character. However, they do not generally enjoy working where they have to pick a joint and move it, pick the next joint and move it to create the performance. I'm going to explain a little bit about that in a second. So because they don't want to work with 200 and however many bones we have in our body, what we do is we create a lot of different controls. You can think of it as a marionette or a puppeteering rig. We create these controls so that you can, the character animator can then create the performance. So what does that look like? Whoa, okay. All of these different colored controls represent different parts of what is movable on our character. And you'll notice that as I pick them, it highlights. So if I pick the marionette or the puppeteering control for the body and I move the character, let me actually hide my other pieces. If I move the character, you can see now I am moving the entire character's body by picking one marionette control, and I can move it around. Now, this is still, generally speaking, the work of the character setup artist or the technical artist. They're creating the controls so that the animators can more easily create the performance. Now, once the controls are built, how does an animator do their work? Well, that's a whole other school. There's a lot that goes into it, but generally speaking, what they do is they work in time and space. What they do is they, based on what it is we want the character to do, they start with a series of frames. And you can think of it just like film or TV. Every second that you're looking at the screen, there's a frame that goes by. So in film, a 1 second of film is made up of 24 frames. There's actually 24 frames that are flashing in front of your eyes. Game, depending on the experience, sometimes it's 30, sometimes it's 60. It depends on if it's real-time virtual reality or not. But generally speaking, there's a whole lot of frames per second. So what that means is the animator goes through and they create a pose. So let's say that we wanted to have this character jump. So they might take this character, and I'm just going to demonstrate real quick. They're going to take this character and they're going to use these controls to pose it so he looks like he's getting ready to jump. This is the first frame. They pick all these controls and they do, basically they tell the application they're using. There's a lot of different applications that do this. Maya, 3D Studio Max, all kinds of different things. And what they do is they set a keyframe. And by doing that, that was frame 1. If they go forward in time to frame, like 4 frames later, for example, what they can do is they can set another keyframe. So I'm going to move this character up and just quickly demonstrate this process for you all. So they're going to move the character's feet, bring it up, maybe create a quick little stretch frame here. So what's going to happen is now the character is jumping. So let's just say this is jumping. Now I can go back and forth between these two keys. So the animator will go through frame by frame, not quite frame by frame. Fortunately we have the process of in-between, and the computer helps us with this, but this is 2 frames to create a jump. If I were to drag, you can see the character is interpolating, it's called, basically interpolating to jump up. And then I can also bring the character back down if I wanted to. But the overall point here is I do not want to get lost in this. Our character animator will create the performance of this character going back and forth. And I can just play what we've created here so you can see it jumping up and coming back down. Now, there's more than one way to create the performance. There's a whole another discipline called, or you've probably seen it or heard of it, motion capture, where you get a lot of you get performance actors who are wearing suits, and they have a suit with a bunch of tracking balls on it, and there's all these special cameras and equipment around a room that basically record a real live person's performance. That can get pulled in later. So what's the point of all this? The point of what a character animator is working on, or a performance capture, and you can even do it with your phone now in a lot of cases, the point of all that is to create the motion, the performance. Great. What else happens? Well, we need colors. Colors are often done by our character artists. Sometimes they're special artists that are texture artists. But the overall point is, what is the look and feel of this jacket? What color are the sleeves, etc.? And they will do things like paint on patterns, etc. And that's a texture artist. Also, sometimes our character artists do those as well. So now we have our model, we have our skin, we have our character control rig or marionette rig, and we have our animation. How does all this come together in Engine, in the game, and the experience we're trying to make? Well, what ends up happening is we take each of these pieces and we generally will export them from the DCC, Digital Content Creation Package, whether it be Maya, Blender, 3D Studio Max, it doesn't matter. What we do is we take each of these and we export them strategically here, okay? First off, remember our model? Our model was pulled into the character rig. So we generally don't export that one separately. It gets exported as part of the character rig. So what happens is the character rig gets exported, usually as some intermediary file. And in this case, for example, in Unreal Engine, we're working primarily with FBX files. That is a file format that Unreal Engine understands. And so if we export our character's skeleton, our character rig, when we pull that into Unreal Engine, what we end up with is our skeletal mesh. So our skeletal mesh comes from the character control rig, which is a combination of joints and the actual geometry, our character's skin. So we have this in Engine and we can now see it, but it doesn't move, right? Remember, the performance is done by the animators, and that is separate. So the animators will go through and they will do everything we need to do to create our experience or game. So they'll go through, they'll create a jump, they'll create a walk, they'll create a run, all of these different things. And then each of those pieces also get exported as animations. Then what we do in our engine is we will import each of those animations. So now in our engine, we now have our character with its skin and the bones. And we also have animations. And the animations will get put onto the character, and I can show you what that looks like. So you can see here we have our character, and just in its simplest case, you can see here in our preview controller, if I change this to a specific animation and I choose run, or let's see, jog. Do I have a jog? What do I have here? Jog forward. Okay, so this is a jog forward with a weapon. This character has a weapon. So either an animator or a motion capture session was done to create this animation. The animation gets imported in as one of our anim sequences, and then that can be used to show or play on the skeleton, so the skeleton will use that animation, and that's what we're seeing here. So all of that then gets combined into the pawn for our character. And if we were to look at this in game, all of this gets, the culmination of all this is it all comes together to be our playable character. So through a combination of all of the artists involved along the way, your concept artist, your character artist, your texture artist, your technical artists and rigging artists, animators, all that gets exported. You get your skeletal mesh, you get a skeleton, you get animations, you get a bunch of textures and materials. All that comes together. It gets put onto the character that goes in game. If we were to eject from this, you can actually see here, if we zoom in, you can see our character is idling, just waiting to move, which is cool. And this is all because in this particular case, this character is able to use all the animations that were created because of skeleton compatibility, but that is a whole other video. We are focused on the character pipeline. So front to back, that is what a character pipeline looks like. Now, there are a lot of other little nuanced pieces of this that come into it, but when we talk about the visuals, the actual source art, that is a broad picture overview of what all of the steps look like, so you know how this comes together and what are all the pieces made up of, and which types of artists are working on each of those pieces. So stay tuned. Based on community feedback, we may be doing some more of these. We thought it was important for you all to understand how a character comes together in Unreal Engine for your own production and experiences. As always, thanks for checking out the video. Throw feedback in the comments section down below, and I'll see you all on the next one. Take it easy.